Hi, and welcome to this workshop called The 7 Traps to Stop Lawyers from Growing Revenue in Their Practice. My name is Steve Riley. I'm an attorney and a practice advisor at Atticus, and I get the pleasure of doing today's webinar. Atticus is a company that was founded in 1989. We've just celebrated our 25th year, and we really have created a niche inside the solo and small firm market, helping lawyers increase their gross revenues, increase their personal incomes, while at the same time reducing the amount of stress and time in the office. And today's webinar is really designed to accomplish two things. Number one is to help you avoid 7 traps. Like I said, we've been doing this for 25 years, and we've seen these traps over and over and over. So I want to walk you through the 7 traps. And if you're interested, we're going to invite you to take a look at the challenge to really play a game to double your revenue. Not only increase it a little bit, but also to double it. So we'll walk through how to do that at the end of the webinar. So let's talk about trap number 1. The first trap that we see lawyers make all the time is failing to make time to think and work on their practice. Now that sounds easy to say. You're like, Steve, give me a break. You know, I'm running as fast as I can. And that's really the challenge that most lawyers are dealing with. They're leading a crisis-driven life that's driven by a crisis-driven practice, especially my brothers and sisters of the bar in litigation. It is tough. It's tough because you always have a crisis du jour. There's something happening that day that sucks and drains your time and attention. It gets further compounded if you're not marketing well and you're not pricing well and you're in a position where you're having to chase cash. And so if you're chasing cash, trying to make payroll, trying to make rent, trying to pay for your marketing expenses, you have that on the treadmill feeling. And that is further compounded by feeling time-starved. There's no other profession that I'm aware of that feels quite as time-starved as lawyers. And the stress levels from lawyers are at an all-time high because they have so many different demands on them in their practice. There's only one really strong recommendation we can make for you here. You have to take the time. You must invest the time to take a step away from your practice to think, strategize, then act to improve upon your practice. Otherwise, you'll continue to have that Groundhog Day-like experience where it's the same day over and over and over again for the next 10 years of your life. Here are the 3 things that we recommend. Number 1, we recommend at least 1 day a quarter. If you can isolate and protect 1 day a quarter, do nothing but working on your practice, we promise after the end of the year you'll see some improvements. If possible, I recommend that you protect 2 hours a week. And 2 hours a week in your practice that's about building the practice, improving your systems, process, training, marketing, whatever that may be, but 2 hours a week. And then as a bare minimum, if you're like, look, I can't handle a day, a quarter, I can't handle 2 hours a week, at a bare minimum, I'm going to recommend 15 minutes daily, that you at least protect 15 minutes a day so you can make small improvements every day in your practice. Because if you don't do this, your practice slowly but surely will just overwhelm you and wear you out. Trap 2, which supports you finding time to grow your practice, is if you fail to establish a minimum case value. Most lawyers, when they see a case, if they know how to do it, will take it and not really think through the profitability of a case. If they say, I know how to do this type of law, they will do that type of law first and foremost. But they won't think through, is this case going to be a profitable case? Number 2, and this is a classic mistake, I think everyone made this, if they don't know how to do a case, but they need the cash flow, they take the case. And as a result, what ends up happening is the case is a complete unprofitable case because they're learning how to do the case, they've priced it poorly, and they're overwhelming their staff because they have no systems or process to handle the case. So I'm okay if you're trying to learn a particular area of the law, but understand that you're really going to pay a significant price. The strategy in this case is to really talk about how to upgrade your case values or your client value over time. The quickest way to start this process is to create what we call a minimum case threshold, which means that certain cases, regardless of the simplicity or complexity, should not come on if they don't establish a certain case value. Now, if you're contingency fee cases, if you do contingency fee practice, it's easier to understand how to do that. If you're doing hourly rate or fixed price practice, it's also easier to do that. But if you look at this, I want you to take a step back and say, okay, what would be the minimum case threshold? And if you're thinking, well, boy, you know, Steve, if it's my practice, I may think that my minimum case threshold should be $3,000. And if the firm doesn't generate $3,000, I shouldn't do it. And then I would add another $500 to $1,000 onto that to establish your case threshold. I would just pick a number and add a little bit above that. Another way of doing that is to rank your clients through a scorecard and start to think about, well, what have been my A cases, which are my best, my B cases, my C cases, and my D cases. And I'll show you an example of that in a second. We want to be really clear on the case value or average revenue per case and really adopt an approach that for the next 90 days, you're only going to take A and B cases and you're going to pass on the C and Ds. Now here's an example. This is a tool that we use all the time with our clients. And this is a kind of a generic one. We have one for family law, personal injury, elder law, estate planning, you name it, we probably have it. We work with about 400 firms around the country. So when we look at this, we have a lot of different looks at different types of practices. But this is kind of a generic form that you can at least get an idea about this. So an A case, when you look at an A case, what would be the profile of this client? Is this a nice client, or are they somebody that would refer your work? The type of case, that you'd be interested in and you find fascinating. Case value, is it a good case value? Is it a collectible case? Is it money that we got up front? Do we get all of our money up front? Is it a great referral source? And does the client have good expectations about the outcome you'll be able to get from them? Now, contrast that against, let's say, a D case. So let's say we have a terrible client. They're a complete jerk. They're a jerk to us. They're a jerk to our staff. The case is a poor case. The case value is marginal. Whether we got money up front or not, you know, we start scratching our head like, boy, is this case really worth it? The referral source might have been a very demanding person that expected you to take the case because they referred it to you. And the client expectations may be very unrealistic. A D case is the type of case that will totally gunk up your practice. And usually when we start working with lawyers, we find they have 3 or 4 D cases and they're just really gunking up the firm. The only way to solve this over time is start to slowly but surely upgrade the clients as they start to come in. The other way, of course, is start to hire some of the clients and get rid of some of the cases. But we don't see many lawyers doing that. There's a lot more complexity to that from an ethical perspective. So we have to be careful about saying you should just fire your bad clients. That would be our preference, but it's hard to do. My experience is that over time, if we can upgrade your clients as they come through, you will actually start to improve the value of your practice pretty dramatically. Now, the other fun thing to do with this is that you may think you know who your A clients are and your D clients. What a great thing to do. A great thing to do is to sit down with your paralegal and your legal assistants and have them also grade your clients. My experiences will be very, very educational. Trap 3, failing to protect yourself from burnout. When you're frustrated with the growth of your practice and you're frustrated with your practice, what most lawyers do is they work harder and they run faster. And what I experience is that there's a higher risk of burnout with this type of mentality. So if you're worried about burning out, running faster, meaning moving faster and doing more work during the day, won't solve the risk of burnout. Ignoring it won't solve it. Hoping you won't have burnout won't solve it. And clearly working harder and longer won't solve the risk of burnout. This is why we see so many lawyers, after establishing a great practice, either walk away, transition into another career, or just get so exhausted, their practices start to decay around them. It's because they're burned out. They've worked too long, too hard, and they've taken on too much. And as a result, they're not in the best shape to do this anymore. So our recommendation first is to take a massive step back and look at what you can do to protect you. What can you do to protect your physical health, And in particular, what do we have to do to make sure that you're taking good care of yourself physically? And I'm not talking about the capability of running a marathon or doing some kind of fitness competition. I'm talking about just good physical hygiene, where you're taking good physical care of yourself. You're doing some type of exercise and stress relief regimen that will improve your health over time. I see a lot of lawyers sacrifice their personal health in exchange for building a good practice. And it's just a terrible mistake, because right when the practice is growing and peaking and the lawyer's judgment is at its best, they have a health crisis because they forgot to take care of themselves. Number two is protect your mental health. A lot of lawyers have what I call the used to kind of life. Well, I used to play golf. I used to sail. I used to go on vacations. I used to read for fun. I used to do things with my spouse. And that's a sign that you're on the road to burnout if you say, I used to. If you're currently not doing those things, you're not protecting your mental health. And number three is you're not protecting your most important relationships. Study after study after study shows that the success to a long-term life is really having tremendous key relationships. And when I say key relationships, I'm not talking about your partners, I'm not talking about your assistant, your paralegal, I'm talking about your spouse, your children, the relationships that really matter in life long term. And a lot of lawyers will sacrifice those relationships because the law and their law practice will just suck them dry if they let it. Ultimately, you own the practice and you own your time. You have to start establishing boundaries to protect yourself. Trap 4, failing to plan and train for strategic delegation. What I mean by that is that there's a significant difference between tactical delegation and strategic delegation. Tactical delegation is where you hand off a task or project. For example, you may hand off to an associate or paralegal. Please draft this agreement for me and bring it back for me. That would be a tactical delegation. A strategic delegation would be, from now on, you're responsible, associate or paralegal, for drafting all the agreements that come in. And it's where you delegate a process or department. So this is where you're getting something off your desk permanently. You may be supervising it, you may be reviewing the quality control, but at the end of the day, someone else is responsible and accountable for that process. The second part about this is that lawyers usually are trained by being under fire. What I mean by that, I always tell the story, my first week on the job as a young lawyer, when I passed the bar, I was going to second chair a jury trial. And I think we all have this story, but the lawyer I worked for was not particularly well organized, and what happened was he had scheduled a bench trial at the same time. And he discovered it at the last minute and basically handed me the file for the bench trial. And by the way, I had been admitted to the bar maybe a day and a half now. Handed me the file for the bench trial and says, you need to get over to this town, which was an hour and 15 minutes away, and you have 45 minutes to get there before the trial starts. So I literally was reading the file, driving, and trying to get there as fast as I possibly could. That is trial by fire, a complete disaster for me, stressful for me personally, terrible for the client, doesn't help the reputation of the firm, and most lawyers think that's how we need to train our staff. So we do trial by fire, trial by abdication, or drive-by training. We really don't step back and say systemically, how do we train people so they can perform better in their firm? So my recommendation to get out of this trap is, over the next 90 days, select one thing, just one thing, that you can strategically delegate off your desk. It may not work the first time, so you want to learn and study why did it work. And the reason why that didn't work may also be the real issue why your practice is not growing. So it's something that you want to pay attention to. Trap 5, pricing too low and staying there. A lot of lawyers, once they establish a price rate, whether it's hourly or fixed price, will stay there for a long, long time. And they will just hang out there, and maybe 5 to 10 years. It's not surprising to me when I do a workshop for a bar association. When I ask when's the last time somebody raised their fees, it's not surprising to see it be a 3 to 5 to 10 year period before someone's examined what they're charging and why they're charging it. Usually once they find a rate that they're comfortable with, lawyers hang there. Number two is the challenge is not teaching your support team, your associates, and other billable players on your firm how to be more effective. My experience is that a lot of lawyers are taking the approach, they'll figure it out. My experience is it's a terrible approach. You want to take a step back and say, how can I train these people to be very effective and very productive and very accurate on their timekeeping? My recommendation is first, you lead by example. I would encourage a gentle, not dramatic, but a gentle raising of your rates. My experience is 95% of the time you will not receive any pushback. 5% of the time you will. So it will look terrifying to you. Don't let the 5% control the 95% increase. So you will have a little pushback somewhere, but not everywhere. My experience is the majority of your clients, especially if they're good ones, won't give you pushback. Some of the bad ones will. So that's the 5% raising their hand saying, hey, you should fire me as a client. So you want to look at that as a strategy. Number two, I'd recommend that when you start looking at raising your rates, to ignore your peers. What they charge ultimately really doesn't matter. It's usually just something that we do to build our own confidence. If you look at it, I usually say that there's 3 reasons why what other lawyers charge doesn't matter. Number one is if you ask other lawyers what they charge, most of the time what they tell you is a lie. What I mean by that is that they want to look good to you. They want to look like they're very successful. So they may say something like this, well, I charge $500 an hour. Well, the next question is, what is your effective hourly rate? Which means what you bill and what you collect may be 2 different things. And this is very common in the family law area. You'll see a lawyer say, well, my hourly rate is $500 an hour, but when you actually do analysis of what their effective hourly rate is, it's closer to half that. So you have to be careful when a lawyer says they charge something. That may not really be true if what their effective collection rate is that really matters. And third, ultimately, whose opinion is it that matters when it comes to what we charge? Not other lawyers. It's really going to be clients. So the only time they can really test what you're going to charge will be on clients. Trap 6. Not having a strong or conscious referral-based marketing strategy. Here's the challenge. If you're too busy to think, then you're usually too busy to market. If you're too busy to market, then you will never be able to strategically and systematically upgrade your clients. And if you can't upgrade your clients, ultimately what will happen is your costs will continue to climb as your revenue stays flat. And what you'll do is start to feel that squeeze on your personal income. So when you look at this, it is just a terrible, terrible outcome if we don't invest some time on referral-based marketing. Now, there's a lot of different ways you can bring business in. You know, there's a lot of things that you can do through your website. There's a lot of things you can do through social media. But at the end of the day, we have studied this backwards and forwards, and nothing on a revenue per case basis will beat referral-based marketing. So our recommendation is the first thing to do if you've not done a lot of referral-based marketing is identify in writing who you want to connect to. And we suggest 2 categories to begin with. Number 1, who sends you great work now? And 2, who do you want to send you great work? And what you want to do is prepare a list of fun things to do with the people that send you great work and those that you want to send you great work, and see what you can do to connect with them. Now, when you do that, when you establish, let's say, you just identify something fun or something simple like lunch or coffee where you meet them, one of the most powerful and simple things that you can do is learn to ask for business. Some lawyers do what I call bumper car marketing. They go out in the marketplace and they bump up against other referral sources, and they hope to God that because they bumped into someone that will generate business. My experience is it's not that effective. So one of the things that will really increase your effectiveness based on our studies, it'll be an increase of about 50%, is if you ask for work. And I have 2 examples of this. Now, of course, you want to set this up ethically. You want to have a strong relationship, or at least a decent warm relationship with a referral source. And here's 2 examples. I have about 20 fun ways to ask for business. Here are 2 examples. Here's the board request for business. Dan, I am bored out of my mind. You got any great cases that we can work on together? I'm looking for something challenging. Simple, easy request. The next one is a fun request. Patty, I have a lot of fun working cases together with you. You got anything we can do together? Once again, a complete, simple request that you're asking for a referral. So, of course, you want to take under consideration your ethical rules in your jurisdiction. But my experience, if this is an existing referral source and you ask for business, there's lots of different ways to ask for business that's fun and expensive and simple. But my experience is that if you don't ask, you won't get it. Great. Trap 7. No plan to deal with change. Now, there's several types of change that I want to address. Number 1 is the legal industry is changing quickly. The statistics showing how hard it is to get a job out of law school, to how hard it is to sell your practice, to watching some of the larger firms collapse under the weight of their own debt, is telling all of us that the industry is changing. Everywhere that you look around, things are changing, including unregulated competitors that sell, legal services via the internet. So you want to really appreciate that the industry is changing quickly, and a lot of lawyers aren't. They're just sitting back being frustrated by it. Number 2 is if you decide to make some changes in your firm, my experience is change is something no one likes to do unless someone else is doing it, meaning that you're totally fine if someone changes over there as long as they don't impact you. And then number 3, the other challenge about this is it feels like time is speeding up. With technology improving so dramatically, the ability to communicate quickly is so amazing that there's actually the experience of you having less time to think. So between the industry changing, the fact that no one likes change, and feeling like that you have less and less time to implement change, it can be very, very overwhelming. At the end of the day, I really think what we do as a company is help lawyers think about, deal with, and implement change. So I want to share with you what we call the Atticus change formula. If you don't have these 3 things lined up, you're not going to see change occur in your life or in your practice. So these are the 3 key elements to implement change. You have to have a compelling reason to make the change. I see this over and over and over. If you don't have a compelling reason to make more money, a compelling reason to take more time off, a compelling reason to take care of your health, you're not going to make the change. It's just like an alcoholic who says, well, I don't have a reason to stop drinking. I like drinking. If you don't have a reason, if you haven't gotten to a point that you're compelled to make a difference in your life, you won't make the change. So you may want to say, how committed am I to make these changes so I can really grow my practice and have a better life balance? Because if you don't have a compelling reason to make the change, you're not going to. Number 2, if you make a decision, have you accountability, if you make the decision, have you a compelling reason to do so? You need to have an accountability and follow-up structure. Based on all the studies from leadership management journals, psychology journals, studying how people change or implement behavioral change in organizations, the following statistic is seen over and over and over. Without an accountability and follow-up structure, only 2% of the people that try to implement change in an organization will be successful. That's what I said, 2%. The 8% of the time, without an accountability and follow-up structure, change will not occur. So if you're helping your paralegal change a process, if you're helping your associate change, or if you're helping your partner change, if there's not an accountability structure and a follow-up structure, change will not occur. 3, strategy and coaching. We've talked about strategies to get out of the traps that we just talked about. We walked through a couple of different strategies for each trap. But without coaching and feedback about how to implement those strategies, change will not be successful. So if you're listening to this and you're like, I really want to make some change, I would suggest you write this down. I don't care if you put it on a sticky note. I don't care where you put it. But if you don't have these 3 things lined up, in my experience, you will not be effective implementing change in your practice or anywhere else in your life for that matter. Now, with that being said, the question might be at this point is what's next for you? I'd like to talk to you about 2 different things. Number 1 I mentioned before is what we call the Double Your Revenue Workshop. And the second thing I want to talk about is a practice diagnostic. First, let me talk to you about the Double Your Revenue Workshop. The Double Your Revenue Workshop is a 1-day workshop that's designed to help you think through what's in the way of you increasing your revenues by twice. Now, the quickest I've ever seen someone double the revenue is 7 months. The average I see for the solo practitioners that have gone through this workshop is somewhere between 18 to 24 months to double the revenue. I've had some people do this workshop, not double the revenue, but be delighted because they increase their revenues by 30 to 40%, which are dramatic increases if you think about it. So this workshop is really designed for just that, a lawyer that wants to have a growth mindset, who might be entrepreneurial in nature, who's looking to take their practice to the next level. They might be bored where they're at, or they might feel plateaued where they're at, or they might be tired of that Groundhog Day, that treadmill running feeling, and they're ready to go to the next level. The great thing about this workshop is it's typically limited to 25 other lawyers and 1 day. So if this is something that you're interested in, we'll be delighted to talk to you further about it. If you're like, nah, the workshop, I'm really not, I don't think I'm ready for that. I'm really not in a position to double my revenue. I feel really overwhelmed. I like the 7 traps you shared. Then the best place to start with us is what we call a practice diagnostic. And a practice diagnostic is going to be with one of our certified practice advisors on a way to improve your practice in what we consider the 4 cornerstone areas of growth. Number 1 is marketing and client development. If you don't know how to market and bring in clients, it's going to be very difficult to grow. Number 2 is time management. If you're already feeling time-starved, we're going to have to teach you some time management skills to make room in your practice, to make room in your day, to make some changes. Number 3 is staffing and managing your staff. It's probably the blind spot that most lawyers have in growing their practice, and quite frankly, it's the most powerful way to grow your practice is through other people. So if you don't know how to hire, train, manage, coach, and support your team, this will be a blind spot for you and be very difficult for you to grow your practice without improving that business skill. And of course, last but not least, is cash flow and profitability. Where are you with understanding the financial side of your practice? What strategies do you know? What kind of strategies you need help with? In addition to that, we will do a DISC assessment. And this is, when I first heard of the DISC, I thought it was voodoo magic because I'm like, that is the craziest thing. I don't believe this could absolutely work. But this test has been administered on 44 million people, and the results, when people start to understand their DISC assessment, can be very dramatic because it allows you to focus your energies on your natural strengths. So instead of going against the grain, it tells you this is where you're strong. So lead with your strengths and don't try and improve your weaknesses. Just look at what you're really naturally good at. So for example, if the DISC assessment shows to us that you're a naturally great marketer from a speaking perspective, then all of your marketing needs to be designed around speaking. If it shows that you're really great at connecting with people, then we need to design it so that you're going to do most of your marketing one-on-one connection versus speaking. So there's a lot of things that we can learn from this assessment. The investment for this is modest. The investment for a practice diagnostic is $275. This also includes a DISC assessment and report. It typically takes about an hour, and like I said, it's going to be with one of the Atticus Practice advisors who will give you some suggestions and recommendations. If you want to sign up for one, the easiest way to do it is to go to the atticusadvantage.com website and click on Let's Get Started, and we'll get you registered. With that, I hope you enjoyed the webinar. I thank you for your time and attention, and I look